Welcome everyone to today's webinar on practical AI for tribal organizations. We're glad that you're here. I'm Vashla Andelson. I'm the webinar coordinator for Tribal Leadership Council. And today's session is presented in partnership with Continent 8 Technologies, a company that works extensively with tribal and commercial gaming organizations on IT and cybersecurity. Their clients include groups like Cherokee Tribal Gaming Commission, Wind Creek Hospitality, and Tachi Palace Casino. So over this next hour, you're going to learn about things like what AI is and why it matters for tribal organizations, the difference between generative and agentic AI and use cases for each, practical ways that AI can support governance, community engagement, and operations, and how to protect data privacy and sovereignty in an AI-driven world. You're going to have time for questions at the end, but feel free to pop them in the chat as we go along too. And now let me introduce you to today's speakers. First of all, we have Jerad Swimmer. He's the Regional Sales Director at Continent 8. Jerad is a member of the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians, and he serves as his tribe's gaming commissioner. He has over 30 years in tribal gaming across operations, regulation, and vendor management, and he's worked with 7 different tribes and began his career in 1991 with Muscogee Creek Nation Bingo. More recently, he's focused on helping tribal operators understand cybersecurity in today's evolving threat landscape. We're also joined by Chris Keel, the Chief Data Information and AI Officer at Continent 8. Chris brings more than 20 years of experience in enterprise AI and analytics. He works with highly regulated organizations to implement an AI in ways that are secure, practical, and scalable. We're very excited to have them both here to share their insights. And Jerad and Chris, with that, thank you for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wow, thank you very much, Vashla. We are very excited to be here. We appreciate the collaboration with Tribal Leadership Council, and we were just recently appointed cybersecurity advisors to the board there. And we appreciate it again and appreciate everybody jumping on. We know you're busy. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to be here with us today, so we appreciate that. So let's get started. Welcome my colleague and coworker and everything AI and security, Chris Keel, and let's just get this kicked off. You know, I think for tribes, it's very important, you know, that we understand what AI is. There's always the perception of what we've known and what we've seen on TV and what we've seen in the movies in the past. You know, the first thing I can remember about AI was the movie with Will Smith, and that's kind of what set the tone for everybody's mindset. And of course, we know now, I'd hope that most of you know now that it's far from that. That's far-fetched, and that was just a movie. So, but with that comes along with everything in today with cybersecurity and all the threats and everything, you know, people are the toss between, is AI good? Is it bad? Because we hear all the horror stories, but it is a good thing as well. So with that, Chris, can you please break down for what it is in tribes and what it matters, but can you break down for us what AI is for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important that before we talk about tools or use cases, I really want to reset the conversation around AI. Like you said, a lot of people have a kind of a negative perception, and I've been in AI well before AI was sexy and the GPTs of the world came out, all the way back when it was extremely boring. And so the most important thing for me is that AI is not a single product. It's not a single platform, and it's not a single vendor. It's truly a broad set of capabilities that are already embedded into many of the systems that tribal organizations are already using today. And oftentimes it's being done so without even being labeled AI. The most common one that I think of is if you carry around this wonderful device in your hand, you've been working with AI for a lot longer than what ChatGPT has been around, because you have the wonderful tools such as Alexa or Siri or anything along those lines, the Google side. And I think it's really important because in many organizations, there's an assumption that AI is something they haven't adopted yet. And in all actuality and all reality, it's probably already there, and it's already influencing how decisions are being made today. It's already being used in how systems respond. It's already being used in how data is being analyzed. So I just to kind of reset everything, the real question isn't whether AI will be used. That decision has already been made through technology ecosystems across what's already been in. The real question is who's going to control it? Who controls the data that the AI systems learn from? Who controls those systems who controls where those systems run? And then ultimately, who remains accountable for the decisions that those influences or those systems ultimately influence? For tribal organizations, to me, this is not just a technology discussion. This is a sovereignty discussion, and sovereignty doesn't just stop at land or governance or legal authority. It definitely extends into the data, into the systems, and into digital decision making. And so that's why I think the principle for me guiding this conversation is really simple. AI should strengthen sovereignty, not weaken it. And so as we really focus in on that, I think it's going to be really important that we keep that framing in mind, and then we take a moment to truly demystify what AI really is, and why it's important to us.
Perfect. I did want to say before we go through further, for anybody that has any questions, we will be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So kind of save your questions for them, but please note them. You can even put them in the chat, and Basha will bring them up as we go. But back to that, thank you for that explanation. And so I think it's important, if there's any tribal leaders on the call or on the webinar here, it's important that you understand and that your councils, your committees, your tribal leaders are all educated, because that is the one thing that scares tribes. We're always scared of what we don't understand. So today, that's what Chris is going to be doing, is breaking down why it's good, what can be bad. But again, if you're controlling it, that is the biggest thing. And for sovereignty reasons, sovereignty comes into play. So we need to make sure that AI understands our sovereignty and what we're putting into it and what we're protecting and so forth and so forth. So why don't you walk us into and define what AI is and is not?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always somehow bring in my kids into these webinars, and the reason that I do that is because I test these messages on different layers or different ages, and I found that if it can land and be understood at a third grade level, I'm doing a really good job. And so I've tested this across the board with my son as he's grown up into coding, and I think it's really important now that we've framed this as a control and a sovereignty question, we can truly start to demystify it and go into really plain, very basic terms. Now, a lot of times these aren't the terms that salespeople use, and the reason for that is because they're not catchy, they're not buzzwords in that front. And to me, AI at its core, it's simply software that learns patterns from the data, and then it uses those patterns to assist or automate decisions. That's it. There is no magic layer on top of it. There's no magic behind the scenes that's making it happen. It's truly just a computer system that learns patterns. AI can then help a person make better decisions, or it can automate the decision that would otherwise be done in a manual way. And that can range from something very basic, such as like a rules-based automation, all the way around to advanced systems that can reason across very large amounts of information. One of the most important things for me to explain and for others to understand is that AI success is rarely driven by how sophisticated the algorithm is. It is driven by the quality of the data and the governance around how that data is used. Poor data and weak governance will produce extremely poor outcomes, no matter how advanced the AI appears to be. And I think it's really important because a lot of people are reading items in Gartner, or they're seeing in tech magazines right now that that POCs are failing nonstop. And the reason that they're failing ultimately comes down to poor data. Now, the reason I speak to this is because this is actually, in my opinion, good news for the tribal organizations. It means success with AI is not about chasing the newest tool or the newest technology. It's about using it as an intentional design. It's about strong data stewardship, and it's about very clear ownership. So to understand that this part, we'll kind of go into how AI has evolved and how each step has increased both in the capability and the risk. But I think it's really important that we just ultimately knock away that it's not the AI is not the bad guy. It's not the iRobot of the world. Ultimately, it's something very simple, and it's something that salespeople are not going to mention because they wouldn't sell product then.
And Chris, would you agree? And I see a lot of from the attendees here, some that I've worked with and worked for and worked, with along the years, but it's no different than people, organizations and tribal organizations and casinos implementing their own regulations and policies and procedures and then enforcing them. You're either going to be weak at it or you're going to be strong at it. You're going to be in the middle, somewhere in between, but it's up to you how you enforce it. And, we all know we all can tell horror stories here, but you've got people that get away with things and people that don't. But in an AI world, it's not going to be able to have that emotion to know, can I be lenient here? Can I be stronger here? Whatever it's going to implement because you're putting it in there. So thank you for that as well. And is that correct though in thinking like that?
Yeah, exactly. And I break it down into a saying: trash in, trash out.
Right on. All right. Well, let us know. Let's talk about how AI has evolved.
Yeah, I love this one. So like I said, I've been around AI for a really long time. I'm old, and well before it was the buzzword that it is today. And so to really understand today's AI conversation, it really helps to recognize that this didn't all truly appear overnight. What we are seeing right now is a result of a truly steady evolution of data scientists behind the scenes working tirelessly and for decades upon decades. And it truly started with rules-based system and very basic automation. These systems allowed these systems that ultimately allowed predefined instructions. They were told and they executed on those predefined instructions. And so in other words, if this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. Many organizations have been using these around for decades. The next step was the evolution of this, and this is really where I came into play and early in my career. It was machine learning and predictive models. Now, these systems don't just necessarily follow rules. They look at historical data, they learn the patterns, and then they ultimately help organizations forecast those outcomes or identify their risks earlier within the process. And then most recently, we've entered the era of generative AI. And in fact, we've actually kind of gone past generative AI to agentic, which we'll talk about in a little bit later. But the most real recent is generative AI. And these systems can create new content. They like text, they can summarize, they can generate reports and responses. And again, it's all based off of what they've learned. It's machine learning that is producing an outcome. And now with that, we're seeing, because generative AI has grown so fast, that drives the emergence of the agentic AI. Now, the agentic side is these systems don't just generate information. What's cool about them is they can start to take actions across systems based on goals and rules. And so each step in this evolution has increased capability, but at the same point in time, each step has created an increased risk to be aware of. As AI has moved from just assisting humans to acting on behalf of organizations, the need for governance, oversight, and control has become significantly more important. This evolution has set up a really important distinction that every organization truly needs to understand, especially when we're talking about risk and sovereignty and data sovereignty and data security.
And so for those of you listening and watching, now we're talking about sovereignty. He brings that up, sovereignty, because that is the biggest thing that we all work for. We're protecting the assets of the tribe and our future and our sovereignty, our elders, and so forth. So, Chris, will you tell us how everything you just discussed matters for tribal organizations?
Yeah, this is honestly my favorite part because I've done a lot of research down this path, and I think it really speaks to probably the most important aspect of AI, and where I think the conversation needs to really go. Because now that we have a true understanding of what AI is doing and how it's evolved, the true question is, why does it actually matter? And honestly, the reality is that many tribal governments and enterprises alike are being asked to do more with less. And I think that's both kind of scary, but at the same point in time, also exciting because it drives innovation. And this is where AI, when used intentionally, can help really truly close that gap. From an operational perspective, AI can increase efficiency by reducing the manual work and helping staff focus on higher value activities. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm a firm believer in this. I'm probably one of the larger ones in the community that isn't saying AI is here to replace everybody. In my honest opinion, this is not about replacing people. It's about supporting them. And AI can also play a very meaningful role in this supporting as we move down the path to the compliance and the reporting. Many regulatory obligations are extremely data heavy. They're repetitive and in all actuality, really confusing at times. AI in this case can help monitor, they can help summarize, they can surface issues earlier, and ultimately reduce risk and improves accountability. Imagine putting it in the hands of your compliance team that needs to centralize all of your data into one point to get your certification and move on. They can then focus in on things that matter, such as revenue generation and helping in the community side. And then in my favorite side is for community members. AI can truly improve service delivery. Now, this might mean faster response. This can mean clearer access to information. It can mean better consistency across different programs. When designed correctly, this can strengthen trust rather than eroding it. And then finally, AI matters because of cyber resilience. Threats are becoming more and more sophisticated. And quite honestly, AI is cheap. And so there's a lot of people that are rolling out AI right now to build those threats. You have to be able to fight AI with AI. And so AI can help detect anomalies and respond in ways that are difficult to achieve in a manual way at scale. A perfect example of this is on a DDoS style of attack. Using AI, they're going out and just doing a bunch of different attacks to bring things down on purpose. They're being quite nasty. The political environment today is at scale with those cyber criminals. They're no longer just picking aside from a money perspective. They're picking it from a money, and they want to make an impact. They want to make a news headline, and so they're going to use AI so that they can really focus in. And you have to fight AI with AI. And the underlying theme across all of this, in my opinion, is control. AI has to be implemented in a way that supports, again, you're probably getting sick of me hearing this, the tribal sovereignty, and preserves the decision authority. And I think that's extremely, extremely important on preserving that decision authority down to a person. With that context, it's important to understand that not all AI behaves the same way. There's a meaningful difference between systems that assist people and systems that act on behalf of organizations, what I had mentioned earlier in that generative AI and agentic AI. And so I think it's really important that we start to break those down and we spend some time focusing in on the generative AI and the agentic AI side.
So that's a good topic to bring up as well, because so for most of you, probably like me, you see the good side of it, and then you hear about the scary side of it. But one thing I want to say to all you tribal leaders that are on the call is that for any part of your business, whether it's enterprise, casino, whatever the case may be, you should be stepping in. You should know what systems that are AI generated and all of that your organization is using. Don't just approve something because so-and-so is bringing it to you. You need to get in there, understand what you're approving, how it's going to be utilized, and that control that we're talking about. As long as you're in control, you're controlling everything about it. So with that being said, I know a lot of people probably out there in the world, like my daughter can explain it to me better than I can explain it. But the difference between generative AI versus agentic AI, walk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So At this point in conversation, that we've probably talked about a ton of stuff, and your mind's blowing this way or that way. You have a ton of questions in there, but I do think right now, especially because all the buzz is around the sizes, most people are thinking of AI through the lens where they have seen it publicly. This usually leans people towards the generative AI side. So if you're seeing it in the news side, if you're seeing it on the web, what's being advertised, what people are trying to sell you, it's typically falling in the generative AI side. And so to me, it's really important to slow down and clearly separate the two from a capability perspective. So again, as we talked about for generative AI is designed to ultimately create content. It can generate the text, it can summarize documents, it can draft reports, it can answer questions, all based off of what it's learned. And it's typically tied to buzzwords like that you'll hear of LLM or SLM. And so they're tied to large language models or small language models that ultimately feed off. Now, this is different than some of the other things that people have talked about in the past, because it is new and it is truly creating in a lot of ways. It's generating new content. So ways that people are typically using this is common examples are drafting policies, summarizing emails or regulations, helping staff ultimately quickly find information. The strengths of this particular version of AI all stem around speed, accessibility, and communication. Now, with this, you probably are sick of me talking about all the risks that come with this, but there are risks that AI brings, and they're very specific about it. Generative AI can sound very confident even when it's wrong. The hallucination capability is definitely there, and ultimately it can also expose sensitive data if you are using it improperly. The scary part for me is it can also create an over reliance if people just stop verifying outputs. I'm going to bring up a key lesson learned out there that you guys might have been able to see within the news. There's a large agency that did consulting out there, and they're going through a lot of trouble because they did not verify the outputs of what their generative AI was doing, and they actually hallucinated, and it created false narratives, it created false statements altogether, and it just made stuff up. That's a real risk. However, when it's used properly, it is extremely beneficial at getting you to speed. So you just got to make sure that you always have that human in the loop type of mentality. Now, agentic AI honestly is fundamentally different. So instead of creating content, think of it as the ability to execute tasks. It can take actions across systems based off of goals, rules, and conditions. Now, I think this is really important because this is basically acting on behalf of a human here. And so where it's really, really good is executing and running compliance checks, responding to incidents, triggering some automated workflows that you have. Its strengths are really around the scale, the consistency, and reducing human error in very repeatable processes. So this is the way that I like to explain it to people is this is RPA at the extreme evolution. So this is what RPA promised in the 80s when they were first starting, all the way back now. It's finally there, and quite honestly, though, we still have some challenges. And so what I want to make sure that I clarify is because agentic AI acts on behalf of the organization, the risks are actually higher. Poorly designed controls can lead to governance gaps or automations that run beyond the intended boundaries. I have seen this firsthand. Now, a lot of people will say we're experimenting, and I think that is absolutely fantastic. A lesson learned for me was I used agentic AI in my own process, and I used it to help create some articles for me to read every single day. It would go out, it would trim, it would make the decisions on what articles mattered for me and what articles didn't. And I got to a chance to see that because I programmed that I did not put bias checks in, and so I was really being funneled down one particular vendor type, and I was being completely left out in the cold on other vendors. And so it can really run beyond what you're intending to without that extreme governance. So the simplest way for me to break down the generative AI and agentic AI is generative AI assists people, and agentic AI acts on behalf of organizations or acts on behalf of people. So you can assist or you can act on behalf of. And the big thing here with agentic AI, as you guys get into it, is it really does require stronger oversight, clearer accountability, and more intentional governance. So a lot of people will say go straight to your agentic process, and I think it's really important that we slow down, we understand what the use cases are going to be, and we carry that distinction with us. Because as we look through how these capabilities can be applied in a very practical and real world way, sometimes you want to go down the agentic AI process when really all you need is generative AI, or you might not even need generative AI. You might just need some basic machine learning kind of capabilities.
And so, like on LinkedIn, Instagram, all social media platforms, I don't know how many times I hear, like, my daughter will yell at me from the other room, "Dad, did you see where blah, 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 blah?" And I'm like, "That's just AI. Don't believe that." Whatever. What would that would probably fall more under generative, right?
A lot of it's going to fall into generative, yeah. So the videos that you're seeing out there, the content, the news stories that you're getting, the big one out there right now is a big hairy ape that tells jokes. That's the most
Yeah.
famous one right now.
Yeah. All right. So I think now you're going to talk about, more about how the practical applications for tribal orgs.
Yeah, this is by far my favorite, because now that we've separated AI from what AI can do and how it behaves, the next logical question really comes into how does it actually show up in our day-to-day operations from a tribal perspective? And so the most important thing to say up front is these are not, in my opinion, abstract or future use cases. Many of these use cases that we're going to go through today are either being explored by tribal organizations, or they're being deployed. In full transparency, they're often deployed very quietly because there's a reason for it. There's a competitive advantage to it. So from a governance and administration perspective, AI can really help support leadership by reducing the manual burden of information-heavy work. So this includes writing, includes assisting with policy drafting, with reviewing of those policies, monitoring the regulatory requirements, analyzing the grant opportunities, and often serving as an internal knowledge assistant for what it's trained on from a tribal approved content perspective. The coolest use case that I've seen here has really been around the certification process around regulatory side. So they wanted to get their stamp of approvals. They enter new markets. There's a lot of tribal organizations have implemented generative AI to review, summarize those regulatory requirements, and then start the responses back for the process of getting their certification, and then they have a human come in and just give that approval. The coolest one is I met with a tribal organization about 3 weeks ago, and they were talking to me about this process for them. And they said it was about a 6-month process prior when it was manual. And they got it down to, from a workload perspective. Now the time still took about 6 months. That's not because of them, but the workload perspective went down to about 2.5 weeks. So they put 2.5 weeks worth of FTE on that. And I think it's really, really cool because in my opinion, this use case, if we put it into context, the AI is making 0 decisions. It's helping the leaders and the staff work with better information faster to get to an end result. The second use case.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
So for all of you tribal people out there, or even worked anywhere where you're waiting on regulations and policies and procedures to be drafted, that is a nightmare. And you know who you are, what tribes you are, and so forth. But yes, so to hear that it can take that workload down to 2 weeks. I mean, I used to be in compliance. I used to write policies and procedures, and you know, I thought I was pretty quick at it, but it still took quite a bit of time for me to lock down and zero in. And then, God forbid, you got to go through so many people to get approvals, and then back and forth and back and forth. So you know, if somebody's wanting to get something done or implemented, or even not hinder the job, the money coming in, this is a big thing for you organizations because it can speed up the process. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted
No,
to note that.
I was gonna say I think it's great to have you chat through the use case, because I was blown away, and that was probably one of my favorite use cases that I worked on, just because I that was a learning curve for me as we were implementing the AI, and we really created that agent based off of or that generative AI component based off of tribal approved content, so they knew exactly where to go. It kept their message, and it was very, very clean.
Thank you.
So my second, and this is probably in full transparency, my baby, my favorite type of use case. So my entire background has really been in the customer experience or the community engagement side of the business. And to me, this is amazing that AI has done. And we've moved away from the traditional IVR component in our contact centers or our help desk, and we've really opened up the capability where AI can improve access and responsiveness. My favorite one was that an organization, a tribal organization, created a multilingual virtual assistant that offered a really fast response and to their most common questions. So they freed up people to be able to handle those more complex type of issues. And it gave it very clear access to service and information. This ran a casino in full transparency, and they had their club, their membership going through, and there was a lot of questions. And they staffed a contact center support team, and with that, they had about 380 FTE. Their AHT within within that contact center was about 7 minutes. And the amount of FTE that they had to go through to answer basic stuff was about 40% of their organization. That was only to handle service type of questions. Because they put in this virtual assistant inside, they were able to save about 35% of their staff, and they moved those staff into a sales and outreach. So instead of being just a cost center, now they're a revenue generation center, which was really cool for them. They were able to generate revenue and cut costs and increase the responsiveness to their community, their customers that they were trying to go through. What it showed to me was when designed correctly, the systems can increase the consistency and the availability, and still respecting the privacy of the customer, the culture, and the context of your brand as it relates to that outreach.
Very nice.
And then and then the last one for me, it really it comes from an operations and an enterprise perspective. AI can help with IT and security monitoring. Going down the forecasting, the financial forecasting perspective, workforce scheduling, vendor risk assessment. That's one of my favorite ones.
Mm-hmm.
And with all of these are all based off of pattern recognition and automation that can drive meaningful reduction in your risk and improve efficiency. Across all of these examples, the critical principle ultimately is the same. AI should support the tribal values, the culture, and the decision-making authority. None of these really replace the human judgment, and they should never replace human judgment, nor should they replace the community leadership. It should strengthen the people and the institutions that already exist. And of course, none of these opportunities exist without risk, and understanding those risks is essential but before we move forward. And so I think it's a great thing to kind of open up a conversation around those risks, and we can get into some of the cybersecurity side.
So that's I thank you all. Thank you for everything on what you've just talked about. So you've explained what AI is, the differences, how it's evolved, what's important, control, protecting sovereignty, and so forth. And of course, this is where I get even more interested because that's where I'm at, cybersecurity. So help us understand how, with AI, let's talk about cybersecurity, the risk, the sovereignty in an AI world.
Absolutely. All right. So I will scream at this from the rooftops. And so before we move truly into that cybersecurity, I want to make sure that we pause on principles that should guide every single AI decision across the tribal organizations. And I think it's absolutely critical that AI should support the tribal values, the culture, and decision authority. It should never replace human judgment or community leadership. I mentioned that now probably 3 times in this slide, this presentation. And the reason for that is this distinction matters because AI is very good at efficiency, consistency, and scale. What it is not good at is understanding the context, culture, and lived experiences. Leadership, governance, and accountability must always remain as a human responsibility. AI can surface information, it can suggest options, it can automate very clearly defined tasks, but it should never be the final authority. When AI is used correctly, it will strengthen your institution. And I promise you, it will absolutely strengthen your institution. When it's used incorrectly, though, it can quietly shift those decision making away from people without even realizing it. And so that's why intent really matters. AI should be designed to reinforce, again, your tribal sovereignty, not erode it through convenience or automation. Holding this principle is especially important as we talk through the cybersecurity and the risk, because in my opinion and what I've seen, many of the biggest failures we have seen with AI happen when this line starts to get really blurry or ultimately starts to get erased. Now that we've had these principles in place, I think it's really, we can slide into the real risks that AI introduces, and then ultimately how tribal organizations like you can start to protect yourselves.
I know.
All right, so now that we have all those principles in mind, I want us to consistently think through those. We can really talk honestly about the risk. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not coming from a place of fear. I've been in AI for 2 decades. I'm an old guy. I've seen it all. I've seen the drastic downsides. I've seen the places of fear. And I want to make sure that we're not necessarily reacting on or talking about it from a place of fear, but rather a true place of responsibility. AI changes the risk landscape in a very few important ways. One of the most common is data exposure. Public AI tools are extremely convenient, but they can put sensitive information outside of your control without anybody realizing it. We've all seen the news when ChatGPT first started that we had a famous electronics manufacturer that put a schematic out on it, and it got leaked about a year beforehand. So their own information was leaked, and their own IP was leaked, and it was out in the World Wide Web to be cloned and copied before it was ever released. Another risk here is model training on sensitive information. So you'll hear me say that saying in, trash out. If the data is used to train or fine tune a model without very clear boundaries, it can become very difficult to reclaim control. A perfect example for this is injection modeling. You can see this quite a bit with data scientists. If I was a bad actor, I could, and I was building a model, I could absolutely do injection molding into my model and purposely train this in a way that I could see benefit. I showcased this really early on in my career by exposing a chatbot very early on, where I was the programmer at the very early onset of utilizing the LLMs or the generative AI models. And I programmed a backdoor in for me so that the customer name by the name of Batman could get whatever they wanted. And I was showing it from a bad actor perspective, but that injection modeling was tuned, and there was no way they'd gone 5, 6, 7, 10 models past where I could still reclaim it by saying I was Batman and I got full access. It would do whatever I said. And so that's just one example. Now that's a nasty, nefarious kind of way. That's a bad actor, but the data is still the same way. If you're training it on data that you haven't necessarily sanitized, it's extremely difficult to regain control. That model will consistently drift. Now, we talked about the bad actors like what I did. That's the injection side, but there's also cyber attacks that are and fraud that are becoming far faster and more targeted and more adaptive because they are powered by AI. This one we are seeing all of the time. My favorite one that I got, and I actually kept it just because I thought it was really cool, and a way that bad actors were utilizing my own persona. I've done these webinars several times. My voice is out on the internet all over. They use this as a fraud mechanism where they used my voice and they actually called my wife. They got a hold of her phone. And they said, honey, I'm trapped. I got my wallet stolen. I'm at a Western Union right now. Can you please send me $5,000? And they carried on a conversation with my wife. Now, the only reason my wife didn't fall for it, in full transparency, is because she could hear me in a conference call at the exact same time. And so that is the only reason. Otherwise, she would have sent that money with no problem.
Wow.
And that happens at the enterprise level too. Your CEOs, your COOs, your tribal organizations' voices are out there, and it's extremely scary. They're getting into videos now. Those deep fakes are extremely real, and they can sound really, really, really spot on. And then finally, AI can ultimately reduce the visibility. When decisions or actions are automated, it can be super hard to understand why something is happening unless its transparency is designed from the get-go. So this is why protection strategies, in my opinion, matter just as much as use cases. Core strategies include keeping your sensitive data out of public AI platforms. I know that seems like a no-brainer, but just keeping it out of public AI platforms, using your private and enterprise controlled AI environments, and enforcing data residency and access controls. And then the last but not least is maintaining human oversight for any critical decision. One reality that we really need to acknowledge is that attackers are already using AI. I've talked through it. Defensive systems must also use AI to keep pace. Manual response alone is no longer enough. So through a sovereignty lens, these are 4 key questions that, in my opinion, every tribal organization should be able to answer. Who owns the data? Where does the data live? Who controls the models? And who audits the outcomes? If those answers are clear, AI becomes extremely manageable. If they're not, my opinion, the right move is to slow down and put the right controls in place. And so ultimately, it becomes how, now that we've answered that, we get to start moving on to the questions that are fun, like how do you start in a way that's safe, intentional, and aligned with our sovereignty.
So pretty scary stuff if you think about it, but no different. You could say we're moving into a bad neighborhood, but as long as we're doing everything to protect ourselves and protect our family and our loved ones, our home, we should be fine. But that's still scary, even though you can protect yourself by utilizing it the right way. And you're right, these bad actors are using AI. And if you're way back in the primitive era and not doing anything to protect yourself, then shame on you. It should be religion to want to protect your sovereignty for a tribe. I mean, that should be the number one thing. You're protecting your elders, you're protecting your future, the children, you're protecting everything in that tribe. So fight it. You got to fight AI with AI. So for tribes that are currently using AI and wanting, and maybe not doing it as good as they want to, or just didn't know, and then for tribes that are wanting to start using AI, can you talk about practical first steps? What do they need to do? How should they go about it? Where should they start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to highlight now, if there's any slide you're going to screenshot, this is the slide that I'd recommend you screenshot. And the reason being is this is my roadmap that I've touted forever and a day, and something that I really want to leave you with practical guidance, Now, this isn't a long-term roadmap. This is just a very clear way to start. So if you're early on in your AI journey, to me, the most important thing you can do is resist the urge to do too much at once. Start with 1 or 2 very high value and low risk use cases. Choose areas where AI can assist people without making critical decisions on its own. Governance should come before that deployment. This means being clear about the data ownership, the access, the oversight, and the accountability before any systems go live. It's also important to separate the experimentation from the production systems. Exploration is extremely healthy, but it should not be happening inside of systems that support critical operations. So just stay away from that. Bring legal, security, and community stakeholders into the conversation early. AI decisions made in isolation almost always, actually, I will say always, create downstream risk. And then shift to spending guidance. When it comes to investment, spend wisely. Spend on strong data foundations and security, as they matter far more than chasing the latest AI tool. I'm going to be, my honest opinion is technology out there is a dime a dozen. What matters most is the relationships and the trust that you can build, and then you can go through and evolve. The latest AI tool is just that. It's the latest AI tool. And then last but not least, in my honest opinion, is treat AI as infrastructure, not a novelty. Something that you build intentionally, you govern carefully, and that evolves over time. Again, I'm going to probably go blue in the face saying this. AI is not about replacing people or traditions. It's a truly, if used properly, it's about protecting sovereignty. It's about improving services, and it's about ensuring tribal organizations can control your own digital futures. So with that, thank you guys so much for spending time. I want to make sure that we get to all of your questions. I know I can talk a little bit, and I wanted to leave 15 minutes. It looks like I just barely ran over. So we'll hand over, and we can get to some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for everything there. I'm looking forward to people talking. Any questions you might have. I will be at Cybersecurity Summit in a couple of weeks there in Jacksonville. If anybody's there, we can meet up. We'll have a booth, and let's get some questions going. So this one comes from Cordell. What are your thoughts on using cloud AI platforms versus on-prem AI using open source models with Olama and automation with N8?
N8N. All right. So I don't fanboy out very often. So please don't. I'm not sponsored, nor am I affiliated with N8N, but I am a massive fan of their framework. I think they do a tremendous job at going down the agentic and making agentic really, really useful. And so I am a fan of, depending on the model, using the cloud AI platforms, and then specifically driving automation with the N8N. Now, I think it all depends on the model that you are trying to do. A perfect example of where I have zero qualms going out on the cloud AI side is I will share maybe my brand voice. I will build how I want to respond to different questions and that side with an outside cloud AI style of market. What I won't do, and I'll always reserve for on-prem, is some of my competitive based data. So I won't do any marketing stuff out on cloud. I just won't, because that means there's always a risk of somebody else having access to it. And then the other thing that I won't do is any of my financial forecasting, financials. I will do a hybrid for sure, but I will not do 100% cloud no matter what. That's just me. Now, I love open source models. I'm a massive fan of open source models. I think it all depends on the use case that you're trying to go down.
Thank you. Good to see you. Good to hear from you. Hoyt Bacon suggests a couple of simple use cases for tribal government. And then Little Ray has a question there for you on your train your AI model.
All right, so I'm going to try and pull up chat 1 second. I want to make sure that I have it. So the question, I believe, was, can I suggest use cases for, oh, there it is. Suggest a couple of simple use cases for tribal governments. Yeah, this one's going to sound really kind of blah, but I'm going to be real honest with you. I think my favorite use case would be something really simple, like meeting minutes and document search. The problem that it solves, in my opinion, is your minutes, your resolutions, your policies, your historical documents. They're ultimately a lot of times really hard to search, and they live in, if they're like anybody else that I've been in, they live in so many different types of documents, from PDFs to Excel to Word to notes to that side. And being able to do a really simple solution of a searchable document repository is something that I would do. I think it saves. The other one that I would probably do right off the bat is going to be isolated around the grant tracking and compliance support. I think that one would be an amazing one to have, because it would make fewer missed deadlines, better compliance, easier audits. I would say if you're managing multiple federal and state grants from different reporting requirements, that one would be a great one, because it protects your revenue and it reduces the administration's costs. I could probably go on and on for forever. So I don't want to bore too much, but I think that's a lot of fun ones.
All right. You got 2 more questions. The AI model.
Your model, do you mean RAG, retrieval from tribal documents, or fine tuning the model using? Okay, what I usually mean is RAG. This is my honest opinion. This is the default and recommended approach, because the AI model ultimately stays the same. Your tribal documents are indexed and retrieved at question time, and so I think of it as, use the model's brain, but give your tribes books, if that makes sense. So a typical tribal data can be used as policies and procedures, resolutions and ordinances, grant agreements and reporting rules, HR manuals and employee handbooks, program eligibility. And so to me, that means you have no model retraining that you have to do. You have no risk of baking in sensitive data. It's a much lower cost side, and it's easier to explain to counsel side and legal. Now, what I don't mean on the fine tuning side, because I think that's really important, is fine tuning is rarely needed from that perspective, because you permanently adjust the model's weights using your own data. Now, I can really geek out here, so I'm trying to stay a little bit higher of a level. But the reason that this comes through is because you have very specialized language that's not handled well from a base model perspective. You might have repetitive or structured outputs. You might have very narrow tasks that are performed thousands upon thousands of time. And so that's why that's usually the wrong step, in my opinion, is because it's overkill for a lot of administration's tasks. It's much harder to do an audit. So I always say start with RAG if you need to ensure your accuracy, if you want to drive explainability, and if you want faster approval and adoption. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Great question. And then Tony McGurr has a very good question about shadow IT. And I want to say something too. I mean, I worked in the compliance for most of the tribes I worked with, and we worked very closely with our IT department. So, as you read the question he has there, we would enforce action on those employees if they're sending it to their personal emails and so forth, and using those types of tools with data from the operation. So we would handle it that way. And I know that's not in the realm, but that's what I would do on the outside. But he's got a great question there, and I'll let you address it.
All right, so I am going to do my very best to answer this without spinning for an hour. I could do a whole entire webinar just on this. So yes, I see this exact pattern with tribes. I just see it expressed maybe a little differently. It absolutely exists. In some ways, it can be riskier for tribal governments than in the corporate environments, in my opinion, because of the sovereignty, the trust, and the data sensitivity. And so to me, where I normally see these experiences or shadow AI, even if they don't call it, comes with staff using ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot on their personal phones or home laptops. The grant writers, this is what's scary to me, grant writers pasting in narratives into public AI tools. I see a lot of HR staff summarizing employee issues in a lot of ways. The scariest one for me, honestly, that I've seen is finance and admin asking AI to rewrite council memos in that front. Now, I want to be clear. The intent isn't necessarily malicious, because it's not. It's productivity pressure, it's curiosity, it's a lot of things. From the end user point of view, what I've honestly found is that the most common response is they're just trying to get their job done faster. And so to me, from a tribal's point of view, confidential data is just honestly, it needs to be confidential data just left tribal control, and there's zero audit trail in that front. So it's scary. Why do I think this is necessarily in particular, I guess, dangerous for tribes? And I isolated that cultural and data sovereignty risk, but the tribal documents that I've seen when we've gone through and we've done some modeling have oftentimes included enrollment and citizenship data, land and housing and benefit records has been a big one. And then I've seen, not always, but I've definitely seen elders and youth and health related information. And that being put into a consumer AI tool, you just lost control over where that data lives. And bad actors are out there. There's a lot of open AI APIs that are out there where people are just screaming and they can get to people's history, and they're able to go through. So that just is super, super scary to me. So to me, the way that I would address it, because I don't want to just come with a problem, but I do like to come with a solution, is you got to name it. You got to name it without shaming it. To me, it starts with accepting the actuality that it's there. We know people are already using AI tools. Our job is to make sure that it's done safely. The framing matters because it avoids putting blame, and it builds trust with the team. The other part is, and I think you need to do it quickly, is provide a sanctioned AI alternative tool. So whether that's Copilot or it's your own internal, it's your sandbox environment, you got to have something that they can use. You can't just take away and say, no, you can't use AI, because that's just not how humans work. Make the rules extremely simple. And what I mean by that is I usually create 5 bullets. And it's really simple. Do not paste enrollment, HR, health, or financial data into public AI tools. Use the tribal AI workspace for work-related content only. And if you're unsure, ask IT. And I open myself up to be asked all the time. And then honestly, it comes down to using that RAG to connect and drive that conversation. RAG reduces shadow AI by design. If you use it right, it reduces it by design.
Right. Well, I think perfect timing. Went 1 minute over. Bashla, you have anything left to say? But before that, Chris and I want to thank everybody for joining. On the last slide, you should seen the address where you can go to marketing@continent8.com if you want to set up a 30-minute session to talk with Chris, one of our AI experts. If you've got any other questions, or something pops up 2 a.m. in the morning you didn't think about, now it's there. Give us a shout, and we will definitely work with you. And that's part of what we're going to do here with PLC. We're here to help you all, and thank you for your time, and thank you for everything. Bosh?
And Chris and Jerad, thank you both so much for all of your insights. I know I personally got a lot out of that, and I'm sure that the folks on the call did too. And I'm going to just throw into the chat, let's see, the marketing@continent8.com, so that you all have that address. So if anybody is looking to book that consultation with them, there's the address for where to do it. And thank you everyone for joining and for your time today.
Thank you both. Thank you all. And looking forward to seeing everybody in the future, and have a safe week and a great weekend.